Thank you for the introduction. Some years ago, I began looking at projects in Asia that go beyond the idea of greening, projects that actively reshape the conversation on sustainability. I found quite a few, and they had one thing in common. They each sought out nature. They sought out our place within ecological systems. From this search emerged a book, Ecopuncture, that argues that ecology is not simply a good to have, it is a must have. The forces of industrialization and urbanization need to be countered with new ideas of how ecology is integrated into architecture and urbanism. We are, however, confronted by mindsets about our place in nature. Oxford Dictionary defines nature as the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth, as opposed to humans and human creations. Collins Dictionary says it is all the animals, plants, and other things in the world that are not made by people, and all the events and processes that are not caused by people. Nature is always the other, the thing outside human existence. This underlying belief leads us to a position on design. Yes, we must be sympathetic to nature, conserve it where we find it, but it is set apart. What happens in cities is very different from what happens in forests. Here is a condominium in Singapore built next to an important biodiversity hotspot on the southern waterfront. What it offers us is a kind of visual representation of nature, towers that seemingly sway in the wind. It does not, however, actively engage with or support the natural systems that surround it. This view of nature has consequences. Here is Mumbai's Mithi River as it was in the 1960s, a vibrant ecosystem of mud flats and wetlands. In the late 1970s, the government decided on a new central business district to bring in some 200,000 jobs into the city. Approximately 220 hectares was reclaimed from Mahim Bay, reducing the Mithi River in the process to a canal with no means of overflow. In the 1980s, the construction of a second runway at Mumbai Airport resulted in a series of very disruptive 90-degree bends over a short stretch of the Mithi. These disruptions to the hydrology of the area created conditions for annual floods that Mumbai faces every year during the monsoon season. And the worst of these in 2005 cost almost 1,000 human lives. Going back to the definition of nature, early ideas of nature were concerned with the mapping of the diversity of organisms or describing laws that govern the physical world. This has transitioned to a more dynamic view of systems and processes, complex flows and exchanges that can result in emergent outcomes. What does this mean for the design of buildings and human settlements? Well, here are some key events and publications from the last 60 years, leading to present-day thinking on sustainable development. We start off with a position on protecting nature. Books like Silent Spring warned us about the impacts that the post-war industrial complex was having on ecosystems, often far away from where farming or factories were located. Limits to Growth projected the impact of population growth and consumption on planetary systems. The central message of both books, and others like these, was that nature needed to be protected from human actions. In the conversations on the built environment, we co-opted this idea of limits, wherein the goal was somehow to eliminate negative impact, maintain a balance sheet of what we take and how fast a system can recover. In the building sector, this quickly segued to green design, the notion that we must simply do less harm, that if a building, for instance, were to reduce its impact, the aggregated outcome of all such actions in a city would be enough. We know now that green is not enough. We have, in fact, in the last few decades, distracted by this less harm approach, further destroyed and damaged ecosystems. The only way forward must be to repair and to regenerate. From the idea of a conventional building, we have progressed to the idea of green, which is still negative. We are now seeing examples of super green buildings, zero energy, zero waste, zero water projects that strive to have no negative impact. But this is not enough. It does not begin to address the damage that has already been done. So now the conversation is shifting towards net positive developments. One of the ways this is done is by adopting nature-based solutions. Now let me illustrate this with the works of one Singapore firm, Woha. Woha has been working with building integrated greenery in its buildings for many years. In 2007, Newton Suites had over 130% green plot ratio. And the green plot ratio is a metric that accounts for the total surface area of greenery relative to the site area. Then came Park Royal Collection Pickering in 2013, and the ratio here jumped to 240%. With Oasia Hotel Downtown in 2016, it peaked at 1,110%. Beneath this escalation was an evolving and shifting idea of the role of nature in architecture. Park Royal is discussed by its architects in relation to the green space in front. The building, by matching the vegetation of this park, becomes a de facto extension, a part of the urban network of green. With Oasia Hotel Downtown, the conversation progressed to the question of biodiversity and habitat creation. The building's facades are home to small animals and birds, but half of what is found in nearby patches of urban green. Perhaps the most instructive of recent WOHA projects is Kampung Admiralty, a mixed-use community and elderly housing development. What's interesting here is how ecology is positioned. The first of these ideas is to mimic ecosystems by replicating the services that they would perform in a natural setting. So rainwater is captured on the roof, it is cleaned on its way down via a series of cascading planters. Clean water is then collected at the bottom and recirculated through the building for non-potable uses. This cleaning of water by natural means is an example of an ecosystem service. The roof is a remarkable space that is a pocket park and a biodiversity node. It is open to the public, has amenities like playgrounds and exercise areas. It has also become a draw for birds and insects who forage and nest in the vegetation. So the building stacks these social and ecological layers vertically, creating a shared space for human and non-human life, while it actively performs ecosystem services. In a 2018 audit of several locations in the neighborhood, it was found that Kampung Admiralty has the highest species count, 50 in total, exceeding those of nearby patches of green. The building has also become a social nexus for the housing estate. In the years since it opened, it has hosted over 130 community activities and drew more than 83,000 visitors from across the city. This symbiosis of the urban and the ecological is seen in other projects in Asia that recreate ecosystems in a bid to generate new urban systems. An example of this is the Wusong Riverfront pilot project in China, near the city of Kunshan. So like many Chinese cities, its waterways have been polluted by waste that is discharged by industry or from runoff from farms. A study identified multiple sources of pollution, and while these pollutions are tackled at source, the question remains of what to do with the adjacent land that has been contaminated. Wusong project attempts to do this. Here is phase 1 of the development, a new park made up of a series of water bodies, taking contaminated water from the river, cleaning it, clean enough to then create conditions for the return of fauna and people. Phase 2 will see a staged construction of a mixed-use neighborhood south of the park. Now, as a result of these phase 1, biodiversity has returned to the site and ecosystem services have been restored. So air quality, for instance, and ambient temperatures have been corrected, while a survey of bird and insect species shows an increased presence of fauna. Since the completion of phase 1, property prices in nearby districts have risen. And this supports the idea that an increase in natural capital leads to a rise in social capital, which in turn increases the prospect of financial capital. There is another project, this time a resort in Sri Lanka. This is situated in a farming area in the center of the island near an archaeological tourist site. The site was selected by the developer because it had been severely degraded over years by poor farming practices. So when he decided to spend millions on the restoration of blue-green systems, many thought he was crazy. The resort was built during the Civil War, and so the idea that tourists would come and pay top dollars seemed quite unimaginable at the time. But he set about hiring the landscape consultant first, who restored the hydrological system. And this meant on-site capacity for water cleaning, storage, and flow. It meant reconnecting the fragmented waterways both in and beyond the site to improve the hydrology of the area. The architecture seems to hover above this blue-green landscape without touching the ground directly. Many of the buildings are elevated on stilts. As a result of this, the flora and fauna are free to roam and thrive undisturbed. The surrounding land has not flooded since the resort opened. the site is now home to a vast number of species, including 140 birds, 25 mammals, 36 butterflies, 25 reptiles and amphibians. It is the presence of the loris, though, an endangered nocturnal primate, that has created a real buzz, in particular among nature enthusiasts everywhere. The result is now one of the most awarded eco-resorts in the world. Prior to the current crisis in Sri Lanka, it was almost always full, despite the high price of the villas. It is a flagship property of the Jetwing Hotels Group, and so it is likely when Sri Lanka is back on its feet, this development will be profitable again. The final project is Organo Nandi, a private development with about 70 homes in India. The sales brochure of this project spoke of a healthier life and a safer home for its residents. Families who bought a unit here sought to escape the big city. So the big city in question was Hyderabad. This is situated on the outskirts of Hyderabad near farming communities. Now, this type of development we see in many parts of developing Asia, where typically it is gated and accessible only to the residents. But Organo Nandi would be different. It would be self-sufficient in food, energy, water, creating a healthy lifestyle for its inhabitants, and in the process engaging the community around it. So the spatial layout of the estate consists of a ring of villas surrounding patches of water and vegetation. There is very good water management here, along with careful selection of vegetation that attracts birds and small animals. The homes are designed as private villas, each with its own food garden. The villas are fitted with solar panels and water reticulation systems that make the estate zero energy and zero water. The systems of the villa are then connected to the systems of the estate as a whole. But while energy and water could be managed with technology, the production of food was more complex. This required human labor and expertise. And this could be only achieved if the estate owners cooperated with the local community of farmers. First, farmers had to be persuaded to pay for farming area, to work for pay on the farming areas within the estate. Second, they had to themselves switch to safer organic farming techniques in their own farms, which had the potential to contaminate air and water in the area. In the years since it has opened, Organo Nandi has carried out a series of training workshops to educate farmers and enter into this kind of mutually beneficial relationship with them. The estate has become an advocate for better farming. Through seminars and events on-site, farmers are encouraged to diversify crops to meet wider market demand. As of 2018, 93 farmers in the district had switched to organic methods. The ecology of the site is transformed. Rain is collected through a network of trenches and swales. It either percolates into the soil or is channeled through recharge pits. Now, these measures came to fruition in 2017 with the full recharge of the nearest aquifer, the elevation of the water table by 36 meters. What we're seeing in these projects, from Kampong Admiralty to Wusong Park, Biluyana to Organo Nandi, is Asia's answer to regenerative design. These projects understand the interconnectivity of the built and the ecological, that there is a direct link between healthy ecosystems, thriving social systems, and economic gain. Nature not only looks good or makes us feel better, it has real long-term value. These constructed ecosystems done right, they expand room for all life, not only ours. And in these emergent systems, the outcome isn't social or ecological, it is both. Understanding this mutualism and embeddedness is at the very heart of regenerative design. Green walls have become the trend today. Biophilia is the new buzzword. But ecology is much more, so much more. Nature is not what we look at, it's who we are. We are the makers of future ecosystems. Thank you for your attention.